Welcome to Natchez, 1842. Dim the lights, wear headphones, and listen for the jar in the roots and the hounds that hesitate. Tell us your city and the exact time you pressed play. If this history matters, subscribe and ring the bell. Now, listen. 1842, Natchez, Mississippi. Night air slick with river humidity, a lantern sways beneath a gallery that has seen too much. Beyond the canebrake and the thin fence of law, a woman listens small. The way needles are small, precise, the way storms are precise. By day they call her midwife, root doctor, trouble. By night, when the iron hush falls over the quarters and dogs are loosed, they say only conjure. She keeps what the overseer forbids and the world forgets. Bone crumbs that miss the churchyard river clay, that remembers first footsteps, a ribbon stained with something older than ink. She does not ask for mercy. Mercy isn't minted here. She asks the dirt for names, the frogs for time, the stars for a seam to tug. In fields where footprints braid flight trying to outrun geometry, she hums a Sunday hymn turned sideways into an older wind. The river listens. Cane leans. A first bead of dog sound threads the horizon like sweat. In the pause between heartbeats, the ground leans back. Daylight wears civility like lace gloves. Riverboat parlors, pewter spoons that never touch hunger. But Natchez keeps a second face. The river polishes at midnight. Ask the ferrymen. They carry more secrets than passengers. Ask the moss. It has listened longer than any judge. In that face, her name is boundary and warning, the ring of salt under a cradle. She lives at the far edge of the quarters, where the path pretends to end. The yard is swept like water's surface. A lightning-struck tree out back holds scars like a river map. In a root-cool tin box, a gold ash twist of hair, blue glass remembering a bottle's throat, 6 rusty nails, a jacket button that never made it home. She takes little 2 eggs a story, a kindness banked yet returns heat from a fever breath to a quiet house. The men with the dogs avoid daylight. Shame prefers dark where it can dress as duty. She knows their horses, their tempers, their grief worn like hats, all brim, no crown. She knows the dogs' names and how their backs ripple like sentences running downhill. First hens refuse the roost. The pump squeals with water still in the pipe. A line of salt appears where no bag was spilled. A jar beneath a house holds 2 moths that do not burn. A scar-eyed man wakes from a dream where a dog's run backward. The scent itself goes wrong, not straight like rabbit fear, but curling back, looping like a child with a secret iron, where there should be sweat sap, where there should be dread. A faint river note and pepper shook over a map. Handlers curse, leashes bite, shadows accept kicks and keep on being shadows. No ledger keeps a column for omens. Still in bed to bed whisper a sentence travels. She turned them once. She can again. A man ran 3 nights ago, not toward rescue, but away from a kind of dying. No sack, no bread, only a name he chose to stop answering. At dawn, the dogs found him. At noon, pride saddled up. In the cane, the chorus broke, voices split like a wishbone as the air changed a psalm bent into a road song. Footprints halved by rain that never fell. A blue feather beneath a stump no bird would choose. Letters in dirt that refused to stay words. The water boy swore the dogs shied and put their noses to their own paws, as if ownership had turned strange. Men laughed with mouths, only eyes busy counting how many shadows a tree can make. Back at the big house, talk of priests, of new packs from over the river, of surprising a problem with a different mouth. No one spoke her name, but minds circled it like vultures testing the air. Night runs down Natchez's ribs. Lanterns catch on buttons. Horses object and are overruled. At the seam between breath and command, she ties a pepper-rubbed red string, sets 3 rusted nails to remember obedience, lifts a jar where river and clay have learned each other's names. She does not pray in pew language. She calls the way a mother calls from behind a door, the way a river calls its banks home after flood. At the crossroad, sycamore roots deep road split like a decision you can't take back. Her signs wait. A moth worries the lantern and will not burn. A thin wire of frost lies in the ditch, though summer sits in the trees. The pack arrives, and a sound moves through them that doesn't belong to throats. Recognition, not pain. The air tastes like kettles and pennies, like a storm choosing a side. Good dogs, trained dogs, begin to turn not from a tug, but from a wall made of stories, tales. Unsure noses down, they track back over braided scent. One lies on the place where the jar sleeps, another licks a paw as if it stepped into a past it refuses to carry. A shell button in the dust burns the water boy's palm like a fresh coin. In the trees, a barred owl shoulders its question. Men try not to hear. Questions don't wait. They jump fences the way sunlight jumps. And the dogs drag the hunt home the way a tired man drags his name. Morning dresses its lie. Carefully. Laundry flutters on lines as if this were any other day. Ash is sifted from the stove with the same practiced wrist. A pot of hominy lifts its slow breath into the rafters. And the whole room smells like a kind of patience. The quarter yard wears circles from sweeping each curve a memory of yesterday's curve. Children chase one another along the hard edge between shade and sun, measuring steps the way sailors measure wind. The Conjure woman keeps to tasks that make the world look ordinary. She pinches a dress seam where a thorn spoke out of turn, ties an apron string twice so it won't betray its knot, checks the jar of rendered lard for that clean, flat surface. That means no hand stole a taste at night. A gully's worth of silence sits under the talk behaved, mostly. She visits a sickbed with graveyard calm, as if illness were a hinge and she the oil. A baby burns small and bright on a pallet. The mother's hands. A ruin of worry, each finger worn thin where prayer has rubbed it. Bitter tea a spoon's worth loosens the fever. A handful of air is whistled into tight lungs. A coin edge of cool cloth is tucked at the warm neck. Nothing dramatic, only a clipped there, and the room can breathe again. Payment is 2 eggs, and a story about a storm that never arrived. She takes both thanks both, and leaves at a pace that doesn't rattle the doorframe. The big house performs civilization, or tries to. A piano rarely honest hammers a hymn into wood. Someone in gloves points at a bolt of cloth and decides its fate. A visiting cousin asks to see the pens, and is led there as if to a parlor. One floorboard in the front room has learned to complain and does so at each step, stubborn as conscience. A ledger sleeps under a paperweight, names weights seasons, arranged so neatly a stranger might say, "This is order." Out back, the smokehouse slants a corner into shade that never lifts. Meat hangs, flies. Mind their industry, a rope sways, even when there is no wind. The world holds by habit. Habit is strong, until it isn't. At the riverbank, ferrymen talk in fish lengths and minutes. Their eyes keep counting the dark corners where water stacks itself. Wordless news rides the current a skiff with a tarpaulin that keeps trying to tell its own secret. A bottleneck snapped clean where a mouth should be. A rope shard that has remembered how it was tied. The river learns everything and repeats it to whoever can afford to listen. Most cannot fields to finish faces to keep in place. She walks the long path by the cane, moving like someone on the seam of a map. You could believe she is simple if you count only what her hands carry: a bundle of sage, a new needle, a tuck of red thread. You would be wrong. The knowledge she carries is not a list, it is a way of holding lists until they answer. She remembers who needs a remedy for a cough that tastes like metal, and who needs one for a cough that tastes like mold. Who will lose a tooth soon, and who should not weep for 2 days, lest tears invite the wrong story to sit. A sparrow wrong-foots a twig, she catalogues the error for later. If you asked how she knows, she would say she doesn't. She simply keeps nothing out. That ought to be in. There is rehearsal in the quarters, visible only to those who have lived long underneath. Women turn pots with spoons that circle once, twice, then the other way for luck. Men wash the same knife twice, once for hunger, once for memory. A boy chalks 3 slanted lines and a dot on the back step because he saw it somewhere. Perhaps the step wanted it. An old man checks the heel of his shoe, then checks it again later, without moving at all. To the gallery it looks like idleness, to anyone who knows the shape of fear. It is choreography, careful, steady, meant to remind the body it belongs to itself. At market, a dispute begins with peaches and ends with dogs. A handler from over the river boasts of a new cross. He breeds mouth like a vice, nose like a book. He names prices as if weighing souls. Men nearby laugh, the laugh that avoids eye contact. Someone asks whether his pack knows the Natchez path, says it lightly, a joke. The handler's mouth tightens. He thinks no one sees. A dog is a dog, he says. He is wrong. He's thinking of tools. 2 stalls away, choosing beans, the woman feels a small rise in her pulse, the way a fisherman feels a tremor on the line that might be fish or the river changing its mind. Evening. She sweeps her yard in circles until the dust looks like light. A blue rag hangs on a peg. She touches the edge once with a fingernail, testing for a cold that isn't there. 3 chairs are set, as if company might show the living, the dead, and the river. The door stands open long enough that a moth believes it has an invitation. It does not. She pinches the air, bends the moth's idea, and it chooses the porch light instead. Night puts on its weight. Somewhere a jug breaks a note and grows quiet. Somewhere else a child laughs without permission, then is shushed by a hand that learned shushing from a whip. The world is almost ready to admit what it will not tolerate. First, the hens won't roost where they always have. The coop smells of someone else's story. Feathers lie like punctuation in a sentence that refuses to finish. The pump squeals like a pig, though water still sits in the pipe. A line of salt shivers across a stoop, no bag split, no prank confessed. Under one house, a jar keeps 2 moths that refuse to burn, lit by a seam of moonlight with no window to explain it. The scar-eyed man wakes from a dream in which dogs run backward paws, lifting the past and stepping into it again. He tells no one until noon. By then, the telling cools into a joke, and jokes keep hands from shaking. The scent goes wrong. The dogs cannot keep the news. Instead of running straight like fear when it wants to live, it curls back, doubles. A braid laid into the dirt with a calm hand. Iron where there should be sweat. Pine sap where there should be dread. A rumor of river without moon, and pepper fallen across a map. Handlers jolt leather. They drag certainty across a night that won't accept it. Boots kick shadows, shadows accept punishment, and continue being shadows. Whips write crooked punctuation into the air refuses to read. The ledger has no column for omens. Therefore, omens to the ledger do not exist. So pretend. Pretend bundles tied under eaves are only old habits. Pretend the pepper tang at dawn is bad bread. Pretend wood seems young again, not because it has seen a miracle, but because someone bought good polish. Pretend there is no whisper traveling bed to bed when candles pinch out. She turned them back once. She can again. Pretend the path to the river doesn't fray at dusk, offering too many choices. Pretend the water boy didn't return with a full bucket and empty certainty. Insisting he saw a red ribbon tied backward on a sycamore root, a knot meant to be untied from the other side of a thought. Pretend, and you might reach morning. Denial must be fed. It eats coffee black as a verdict. It licks the brass of a horn no one plans to blow. It oils lanterns for the pleasure of gleam. It names dogs like oaths, Duke, Sable, Grief, Mercy. It speaks softly of prices, loudly of order. It imagines a priest can solder a night shut, or a fresh pack from over the river will surprise the problem into obedience. It avoids one name hers, as if sound itself were dangerous. It is. Sound is movement, and movement brings roads to the door. She works at the seam of afternoon and dark. Tea boils not for drinking, and steam climbs the rafters in 6 slow breaths. Red string is rubbed with pepper and ash the way a mother rubs a child's back, for breath. 3 nails are trimmed with a file until they remember how iron obeys. A jar where river water and path clay have learned each other's names is lifted like a question that needs no mouth to answer. Her palm presses into ash on the wall, a map of a country no one has discovered yet. She blows until the thumb fades, and the little finger brightens. She is making a key. Only she will recognize. Across the yard, a fiddler polishes his instrument until it holds 2 faces, his and another he does not name. He sets one true note low and lets it float under houses, under beds, under the dog's dream. In the big house, the cook burns a pot of chicory on purpose. Smoke sneaks up the stair and buys 5 minutes from a man who believes time belongs to him. 5 minutes cross the yard like a cat that has been told no and chooses not to understand. Night comes down the ribs of Natchez. Lantern light catches in shirt sleeves and spoons. Horses object, are compelled to agree. Dogs wake to a hunger that is not food. Men stand in small authority over animals they mistake for simple. Orders, curses, half-jokes are rehearsed in tight mouths. The world tilts almost politely. At the crossroad, sycamore rooting, long roads split like a decision that cannot be undone. The signs wait. Red string, pepper bright. 3 nails rusted enough to resemble time. A knot that will only loosen for someone who knows the lullaby salted into it. In the crook of roots lies a jar quiet, full of names. Above it, ash. Around it, moth and frost, both out of place, therefore perfectly placed. For a heartbeat, the night holds its breath. Then the pack arrives. Recognition moves through the dogs like lightning without thunder. Heads turn as if a compass beneath their paws has spun. The air tastes like old kettles and new pennies, like a storm choosing a side. Good dogs, trained dogs, begin to turn, not pulled, persuaded by a wall made of stories. Tails unsure, noses down. They follow a scent that refuses doctrine. One lies on the jar's sleep place. Another licks a paw, as if it stepped into a past it cannot carry forward. A shell button in the dust shines like a coin just minted. The water boy pockets it, burns his palm, and because poverty is loyal, keeps it anyway. In the trees, a barred owl shoulders its question. Questions jump fences without asking. Men pretend not to hear their pretending, worn like armor, thin as Sunday paper. They drag the hunt home the way a tired man drags his name. Lantern's gutter leather speaks, a whip draws its crooked mark, and finds no page to claim. The night goes with them, clinging to rein and buckle, refusing to be shrugged off at the door. They sleep badly and wake worse. Fury is the cheapest courage raids will come smashing doctrine. But for this 1 hour between the turning and the verdict, the quarters breathe, like a body that has remembered its ribs. At the edge of the map in her room, she sets the jar where eyes that come only to take will not find it. She sits in one chair, leaves 2 for company. She allows a breath measured against the river. Not relief dangerous, not triumph pride's quiet twin, only acknowledgement that the night has listened and answered once more. By morning, the rumor has grown a skeleton, and men pretend not to see the bones. The overseer draws a line in dust with the toe of his boot. A neat little sermon about order, then wipes it with his heel as if to say, the knight owes him an apology. The lawman arrives with a hat brim like a shade tree and a pencil that never seems to dull. He smells of ink-old tobacco and the cheap bravery that comes from telling other people what is true. He asks for tracts for testimony for a name he can enter into his book. The handlers show him the crossroad, and the sycamore show him the scratch where a jar might have been, might not. He stares until his eyes water and declares he sees only Satan where others see coincidence. The river keeping its counsel, the cane keeping its whisper, none of this can be notarized. So he writes vagrancy suspected in a firm hand, then squares his shoulders as though reality will follow the flourish of his final letter. They question the water boy palm, reddened by a shell button he will not surrender. He says the button burned him. They laugh. Then examine the faint welt when the boy looks away. He tells them the dogs lay down, that one licked its own paw like it had stepped into yesterday. A handler cuffs him lightly enough to remind him that stories are supposed to be useful, not true. The lawman asks if the boy saw a woman. The boy says only this, I saw an answer. The lawman prefers nouns he can arrest. He writes unknown female agitator, possible Negro witch. The word looks large on paper like a fence, and yet it holds nothing. At the big house, a cousin who likes the smell of trouble suggests posting a reward. Silver turns men into dogs faster than training, he says, and dogs into men faster than prayer. He's wrong, but the room likes the taste of the sentence, so it lingers in mouths all morning, sweet as rot. A priest is summoned from upriver, a thin man with eyelids like parchment who speaks of demons with a farmer's practicality. He sprinkles a little salt in the doorway, whispers Latin that never had to sweat, and tells the master to burn any jars discovered in the quarters. The master nods, pleased to be handed a ritual with European vowels. In the yard, the cook watches this performance with a face like a locked cupboard. When the priest leaves, she quietly sweeps his salt into a clean circle and carries it somewhere the ledger cannot spell. The conjure woman pays the day no mind, or seems not to. She tucks the jar deeper, changes nothing visible, and moves her hands with the economy of a seamstress repairing a wedding dress no one will admit is torn. A man with a cracked thumbnail brings her a broken comb and a lie. He says his wife dropped it. She shakes her head once the kind of no that makes truth nervous and returns the comb wrapped in cloth. Tells him to bury it under the step, teeth down. He wants to ask why. He wants to ask 100 things. He leaves instead because some instructions work better before the mouth touches them. In the fields, the rows hold steady like ribs. Work keeps tempo. Songs test the air like bridges. Hounds are kept penned for now. The handlers ashamed of their uncertainty, but louder in every other way. They feed the pack meat slick as guilt boast about new orders. From upriver adjust buckles that no longer shine right since the crossroad. At noon, a stray wind carries pepper under the gallery and makes a gentleman sneeze into his handkerchief 3 times. When he looks down, there is one red grain left on the cloth, winking like a star that refused to die. He folds it twice and pockets it. He will carry that itch all afternoon and have no language for it. Toward evening, the lawman returns, decides to search cabins. He opens chests as if truth lives in folds, turns pillows as if sleep might confess, lifts floorboards and finds nothing, or perhaps the exact amount of nothing that fear requires. He finds a little bundle tied under an Eve hair thread, a silver bead cut from an older story, and calls it malice. The woman says it is for toothache. He says the tooth belongs to the master first. Nobody smiles. On a shelf, he finds a jar that appears empty until he holds it against the light. A thread of something floats, moves, without wind. He puts it down very carefully, then kicks the table out of its shyness, then writes contraband. Later, in his own handwriting, the word looks silly to him. He drinks to correct the shape of it and wakes with a headache. History will not footnote. Night. Again, a second pursuit because men believe repetition will heal what recognition wounded. New dogs from over the river. New men who haven't learned the shape of this dark. They run a different road, same result. The pack slows at a ditch where frost insists on existing bows to a wind that did not attend church and turns. As if the earth had spoken the old word, the one that means stop in the language of iron. One hound whines at the sycamore and digs where the jar once lay. Its paws come up clean, then pepper stung, then confused. The handlers exchange looks, men in the first hour of a shared secret. One jokes about magnets, the only magic his mouth can afford. Another tightens his jaw until it makes a sound like a door deciding. They return before dawn, bringing with them a silence heavier than failure, lighter than confession. And somewhere, in the dark between cabins, a man not yet free counts his breaths against the river. He has a name that is not his and a plan that is not a plan, only the refusal to be counted any longer. He imagines stepping into a boat made of fog and being rowed by the part of the night that belongs to mothers. He imagines a road no one can see, except dogs. If they come, he prays they remember whatever made them pause. He prays the woman does not have to choose between saving him and saving herself. He prays like a man who has run out of clever. Morning. The third day. Denial begins to fray, which is not to say truth is welcomed. It is blamed. The master blames the handlers. The handlers blame the quarter. The quarter blames the river because it is large enough to absorb blasphemy without spitting it back. Prices rise for dogs, for prayers for punishments. The priest writes a letter to a superior about infestation. The lawman drafts a circular on the misuse of jars. A cousin drafts a speech for after supper about firm measures that sound like mercy from a distance. In the kitchen, the cook drafts bread and keeps it from burning by thinking of a boy she once knew who could steal minutes from clocks. They come for her, not with a warrant, but with the posture of men who believe posture is law. She opens the door before they knock. The room is arranged as always, 3 chairs, one for the living, one for the dead, one for the river. Mint and smoke braid the air. On the shelf, the jar that holds an answer that cannot be subpoenaed. She is not rude. She is not polite. She is the kind of quiet that makes the world adjust its buttons. They ask questions whose answers are already written on their faces. "Do you practice witchery?" a man says, failing to make the word large enough to carry his fear. She lifts an eyebrow, barely a hinge, that refuses to squeal, and says she practices memory. They say memory then is a threat. She nods once, because the sentence finally makes a kind of sense. They search again and find again what they brought with them: shame, anger, a need for a hinge to squeal so they can oil it. The dogs wait outside, tongues, lolling eyes soft with something that looks like apology. After they leave, she unknots the red string and ties it differently. She salts the sill, but not with kitchen salt. She moves the jar a hand's breadth to the left, enough to confuse a thief who believes space is a grid. She whispers to the house a language of taps and breaths, and the house answers by remembering it is a body. She does not touch the door. The door closes. Anyway, the raids begin officially this time. Cabins are turned out like pockets. Little things are broken because little things forgive slowly. A doll loses its face. A prayer loses its grammar. Someone pushes over the fiddler's stool and cracks a leg. The instrument survives by accident or mercy. A bundle under an eave is cut open and declared dangerous because it does not know the white word for pain. The quarter women sweep in tighter circles. Men move slower, like hunters tracking their own footsteps. Children learn to keep questions in their cheeks like seeds. At church, the sermon declares conquest over superstition, the choice of a word that betrays the shape of a fear. After service, the master orders a pit dug for the jars the lawmen will surely find. The pit is square, satisfies geometry, but not the ground. The earth collapses one side as if tugged by a story. The laborers fix it twice. It falls twice. The third time, the master laughs in a way that aches and walks away. Men stand around the square hole and pretend to discuss soil while looking anywhere else. The escaped man. The first one is said to be taken near the ferry, or not taken at all, depending on who needs courage at that moment. A boy swears he saw a boat with no oars moving sideways against the current. Another swears he saw footprints at the landing that stepped in and then did not return. The lawman draws both reports into a neat shape. Then does what men do when neatness fails, he blames the witness. The river keeps its sentences long. Night chooses a different script. No chase, only waiting. Dogs arranged like commas under a paragraph of trees. Handlers sitting saying nothing, the kind of nothing that takes practice. Somewhere a whip flexes its question mark, then goes slack. The quarter holds its breath, longer, then lets it out the way you set a jar down where you meant to keep it safe. The Conjure woman sits in her chair and stares at the place where the wall meets the floor, a seam you can miss if you want to. She lays a little ash there, then wipes it away, then lays it again like writing a letter she will never send. The fourth morning, an answer that looks like a riddle. The pack refuses breakfast. A hound named Mercy noses the latch until it lifts itself. Another grief noses the same latch down again, as if to say not yet. The handlers watch this and pretend not to. Men fear choreography they didn't teach. A gentleman visiting from Vicksburg explains at length that weather alters scent in curious ways. He does not explain the red string he finds tied backwards to his saddle by noon. Orders come from further up the river, from further up the chain, and they sound like thunder written on paper. Remove the woman. End the jars. Restore the ledger. The lawman breathes a little easier with letters in his hand. The priest finds comfort in verbs, like purge, so Roman, so clean. The quarter hears none of this formally news arrives as air. It arrives as a spoon paused over a pot, as a woman's shoulders setting down a weight they did not pick up, as a child learning to play without the sound of feet. When they come again with more men with cleaner hats, the woman is ready in exactly the way a river is ready by already being what it is. She does not bolt the door. She does not tidy the room. She sets her hand on the table palm down and waits for the knock that is not a request. When it comes, she says, "Enter," and the word makes more room than the door knows how to offer. The men step in and find a place prepared not for them, but for truth. Mint and smoke, ash and order, 3 chairs, 1 empty still for the river. The youngest of them looks at the jar and almost says, "Please." He does not. A man behind him says enough, in a voice that tries to be iron and manages only to be heavy. They lead her out, not arrested, not charged, detained. The word that lets men sleep. The dogs rise, quietly. A handler speaks their names aloud, as if recalling a prayer, Duke Sable Grief Mercy, and for a heartbeat, the names sound like people in a family no one claims. The Conjure woman looks past the men over the dogs toward the long sentence of the Mississippi, and almost smiles. Not at them, at the place where the river meets the thought. Then she steps forward, and with that step, the ledger loses a little ink. The rumor grows a little backbone. The night learns a new way to arrange its commas. Denial continues louder now because it can feel itself thinning. Punishment sharpens its tools and mistakes the shine for justice. Somewhere behind all of this, the crossroad waits patient as roots willing to teach the same lesson twice, 3 times, until someone finally learns how to listen. Dawn. And the river wears a color that has no name, pewter. If pewter could bleed light smoke, if smoke could think. Men with clean hats and letters from upriver step through the cane as if paper could teach water its manners. They have a map. The kind that fears curves lines, like orders boxes, like cages, and one neat X where a rumor once slept. The handlers follow faces hard as horse bits. The dogs follow the handlers, and the air follows the dogs, thick with the memory of pepper. The path pretends to be simple, straight, obedient, then kinks like a muscle remembering a bruise. A blue rag hangs in a thorn bush, or thinks it does. When a man reaches it, resolves into nothing but distance. They do not speak of that. They point at the sycamore, at roots that look like hands at the cross, where the road divides like a decision that cannot be taken back, and declare the place a scene. Shovels bite the ground. Iron teeth learning humility. At first the dirt gives itself up politely. Then it resists thickening as if clay were a thought no one could finish. A jar's round shoulder glints, then doesn't. Another spade finds something that sounds like glass answering from under the root. A third breaks into a pocket of smell, river cold and metal sweet, a hint of smoke that is not burned yet. The lawman orders careful work, the voice of caution worn like dignity, and men grow delicate for once. A nail. Rusted calm edges softened by the patience of rain. A second nail. Then a third set in a triangle that means nothing to men who insist meaning be printed. A red string, brittle pepper rubbed that stains a palm with the faintest star. And a jar. Whole stoppered mud at its mouth, the color of a bruise. Held to light, a thread moves where there is no current, a thin brightness furling, unfurling, the way a child's breath fogs a winter pain and lingers to be read. They set the jar on a folded coat, not out of respect, but out of something that rhymes with it. The priest crosses himself without looking, as if he could cross the ground instead. The lawman dictates contraband, ritual vessel, evidence of conspiracy, words that land like buckshot and roll to the toe of a boot. A younger man, the kind who still imagines truth is a trick you can learn the secret of, puts his ear to the glass. Hears only his own blood. He steps back, embarrassed by his face. The dogs press close, then shrink, not from fear of punishment, but from a kind of recognition, the way a mirror confuses a tired animal. One named Mercy lowers her head until it touches the jar as if apologizing. Another grief turns in a slow circle, then sits like a comma at the end of a sentence that will not end. Dig wider, the lawman says, meaning dig deeper. They obey, and the ground offers its museum in fragments, a button that once kept a story fastened, a twist of hair that gold forgot how to stop being. Ash packed neat as the inside of a lark's egg. 9 small bones that agree without naming what they belong to. No skulls, nothing a headline could carry, only the stubborn grammar of care, the syntax of resistance, a ledger of dirt. Witchery, someone says, relieved by a word that lets him stop thinking. The priest advises fire. The cousin from the big house prefers spectacle pile it all. Let the quarters see the lesson, draw smoke. The handlers do not speak. They are busy watching the pack, how noses follow an invisible braid, and then pause, puzzled at a seam in the air. They take what they can, take jars. Nail string the idea of order and march the rest back through cane and light. At the cabin on the map's edge, the Conjure woman waits. Not stiff, not slack, the way a tree waits in wind it knows by first name. The room is arranged as always, 3 chairs, the living, the dead, the river. Mint and smoke and the ghost weight of boiled tea. A handprint in ash like a country the cartographers missed. They set the jar on her table. The lawman asks what it is. She says a memory that refused to stay still. He asks what it does. It reminds direction how to doubt itself. He threatens because threatened men must to break it. She looks past him beyond the dogs through the door toward the long sentence the river writes, and says you can break a jar. You cannot break the name it learned. The priest sighs a tired bell. The cousin smirks, eager for the part where smoke proves him right. The lawman orders the pit. They choose a square of ground behind the big house. Geometry comforts them and build a pile. Jars at the base, like sleeping eyes, nails nested, like patient teeth, strings laid last as if decoration were a ward. Salt is tossed. Latin muttered. Kindling arranged with the domestic elegance of men who have never cooked a meal. The cook watches from the kitchen door face like a locked cupboard and keeps her hands in her apron pockets so no one will see them shaking. When flame takes, it takes quickly blue at first, then a fox orange that tells stories on every face. Glass sings a high failure bright note. String snaps a little prayer breaking its own back. The air tastes like pennies and old kettles. Smoke smears the afternoon with a thumbprint. The crowd leans in as crowds do to be sure annihilation is complete. And then, the inexplicable, which is to say the part of the world that obeys rules written somewhere the law does not keep. A jar refuses not to break, but to confess. Heat bows it, shrugs it, and it holds not by strength, but by stubborn memory. Inside the thread moves against no wind, and every wind a pale filament tying here to elsewhere. The priest steps closer, then back. The cousin laughs, then doesn't. A hound whines the thin wire sound that summons pity in creatures who still remember mercy and noses the ash until pepper stings. The lawman, offended by the failure of physics to cooperate with paperwork, lifts a shovel, strikes, and the sound that answers is not glass breaking. It is a door refusing to finish closing. The jar gives, finally, and what spills is only water and grit, a taste of the river caught on the tongue like a word you can't translate. See, the cousin says triumphant, in the small way men are nothing. And yet, when the smoke rises, it walks not straight, but back. Curls. Returns along the path they took as if memory had learned the trick of tracking its own scent. The pack watches, heads cocked, and something like shame travels through the men without a name to wear. They declare the evidence complete, a phrase that tries to make endings. The woman is led away, not dragged, not held. Like danger, merely escorted by men who prefer the posture of law to its labor. The quarters watch through door cracks, and from the corners of eyes, a widowed kind of seeing. Behind the procession, ash drifts half snow, half word, and falls on stoops where women sweep in circles on fence rails, where children run their hands on the sycamore at the crossroad that has held more secrets than sermons. The river lifts its shoulders and lets the day pass. The ledger would prefer this be the end seizure fire custody. Lesson. But endings written by frightened men are only pauses. Night comes with its own handwriting. The pack-fed, watered, confined, does not sleep. Tails thump, then still. Noses test a seam where air turns interesting. Mercy stands. Grief stands. Duke and Sable stand. The handler with thunder in his bones says half to the dogs, half to the hour stay. They stay. The way a question stays after an answer has been given. Out in the cane, something hums a hymn turned sideways, and the crossroad thinks long thoughts with its roots. At the cabin edge of the map, the door that closed itself earlier does it again. No hand, no draft, a choice. The jar that looked empty if you didn't know how to look now looks like nothing at all. Which is to say, dangerous to men who honor only what they can inventory. The woman sits the living chair, the other two left, untouched, but not empty. She salts the sill, not kitchen salt. She lays a thread across the threshold, not string. She breathes into her cupped hands, not prayer. Outside, boots find the rhythm of a verdict. Inside, mint and smoke braid into a rope no law can see. They come with more letters, more lanterns, more faith in paper than in light. The lawman reads words that try to make a person a problem. The priest holds water that will never touch the right thirst. The cousin holds a smile he has trained for company. The handlers hold leashes. The pack holds itself. You will be removed. The lawman says a sentence like a trap with a pleasant lock. The woman stands, small needle precise, storm precise, and steps forward, not resistance, not surrender, the kind of movement a river makes when a stone believes it can teach. The dogs flinch, then soften, then lower their heads the way children lower theirs in rooms where grief is speaking. And then the thing that cannot be written must be. A wind, not from north, not from river, from under. It lifts dust into a briefing none of the men can read. Pepper or memory stings eyes. Lanterns gutter, recover, gutter again. A whip, someone always carries one, even to a conversation, lifts its question mark and finds no sentence to attach. The ground offers a small sound. Jar glass far away, or just beneath the ear, as if a seam had leaned and been answered. Hold them, a voice says, meaning the dogs. Another voice says, hold yourself. The pack moves one step back, not away from the woman, away from a line on the ground that no one drew. Tails, low noses, uncertain they scent, and smell not fear, not flight, but their own tracks. A circle, a braid, a door in the shape of a road. Panic, the cheap kind, arrives, dressed as policy. Bind her hands. Ropes appear, authority loves props, and find nothing generous to own. The knot that should behave, doesn't. Take her to the pit. They mean the square burned earlier geometry comfort, but the path refuses to stay straight. Men walk in confident angles and arrive at their own footprints with no memory of turning. Someone laughs too loud, the way a boy laughs in the dark, to prove darkness is a rumor. The lawman's pencil snaps. He blames the wood. The priest recites a line, loses the Latin midway, finishes in English. And hears his voice sound like a child's in a room that wants adults. The woman speaks. Finally, not sermon, not boast, the kind of voice one uses to read a recipe to a house that knows how to cook. The earth remembers. She says a sentence so simple it offends. The dogs remember. Mercy whines. Names remember what they were taught. A lantern flares last flourish and dies in a patient blue. The men do not move, not because fear freezes them, because confusion calcifies pride. Pride hates to learn. The pack turns, not wildly, not as if fleeing, as if instructed by kindness. They take the path they know home. The leashes go slack as handwriting in rain. The handlers swear not at the dogs, at the idea of dogs, and then because there is nothing else to command, they command the night to behave. It does not. It. Consequences begin immediately, the way dawn begins, at a single leaf, and then finds the rest of the tree. Orders turn to raids. Raids turn to breaking. Breaking turns to doctrine, the oldest progression in Natchez. Cabins cough up their small contraband buttons, blue glass hair. Jars are smashed, chalk circles washed, strings unknotted by hands that do not know what knot means. The lawman writes, the priest salts. The cousin speaks eloquently about firm kindness that sounds like mercy if you stand far off and close one ear. Yet, the pack refuses certainty. They eat, then pause at the sycamore. They drink, then test the air where the jar slept. They lie on a patch of ground as if it were warm, though night keeps its cold. Buyers come to look to purchase a mouth that will obey and find the pens somehow. Wrong. Fences hold, but not the old way. A gentleman reaches to test the latch and draws back as if time had teeth. The quarters absorb the blows, as they have been compelled to, but they also change a millimeter at a time, which is how walls fall without anyone getting to claim victory. Women sweep tighter circles, not fear focus. Men polish tools until they reflect an extra face, not vanity witness. Children learn a second alphabet, chalk marks, salt lines, songs hummed in a key you can mistake for tiredness if you've never needed hiding. In the big house, the pit settles, the square sags to a shape the ground prefers and will not be argued out of. The master dictates a letter to someone further up, matter resolved, and the ink dries like a scab. At the river, a ferryman ties a knot he learned from watching the wind, and his boat minds it better than any sermon. As for the Conjure woman, her dispersal begins even before her feet leave the yard. Part of her is carried in the lawman's phrase, part in the priest's salt, part in the cook's pockets where the last safe minutes sleep. The men believe removal is a verb that finishes a story. The river smiles the kind of smile only water can manage and lengthens its sentence. Somewhere not far, not near a jar, is set on a cool floor and left to look like nothing at all. Somewhere in a house that knows how to listen, a red string is tied, backwards. Somewhere under the sycamore, the soil keeps a print the size of a dog's paws and refuses rain the right to erase it. And the night, having taught its lesson twice, waits, patient as roots, to teach it again to those who insist they already know. The paperwork arrives first, as always. Lines march across the page the way fences march across a field. Tidy, proud, pretending not to wobble. Matter resolved, the lawman writes a phrase like a lid pressed onto a jar that still hums. The priest reports an infestation purged. The cousin drafts a gentleman's paragraph about order restored. The master's ledger notes a brief interruption in dog performance corrected and then returns to Cottonweight's days. Witnesses are reworded into silence, the water boy becomes unreliable, the fiddler idle, the cook respectable, which is to say, unread. The pit behind the big house is squared on paper, though in soil it has settled to a shape the ground prefers. Receipts list nail string glass, as if naming the pieces were the same thing as understanding the whole. In a margin where clerks confess without meaning to, there is a brown thumb smear like a small wether, and next to it a date that refuses to sit straight. Men sleep better with ink in their hands, and wake with the same fear under their tongues. Lessons are announced, loudly not learned. Edicts forbid jars, circles red string tied backward. Fines punish rootwork charms, unlawful gatherings after dark. The words look Roman in the script, confident as stone. But stone remembers rivers. Patrol routes are redrawn straighter, as if geometry could scare a crossroad into manners. New dogs are purchased from upriver, mouths praised, noses weighed, pedigrees sworn like prayers. For a season, the pack obeys the new map, then pauses at the sycamore and writes a different sentence with their feet. The youngest handler resigns, says it is his mother's health. Men nod as if they believe him. The lawman replaces his pencil with a sturdier make. It snaps, of course, at the same seam in his thinking. The priest forgets a Latin line mid-sermon and finishes in English. The congregation hears a child's voice and cannot say why it makes them sad. The quarter learns the lesson that matters, that erasure is only a pause between speakings. That you do not save a story, you live carefully until the story saves itself. Women sweep tighter circles. Men sharpen hoes like memories. Children memorize chalk marks as if they were letters no school will teach. In the kitchens and lofts and along the river steps, the true directives pass mouth to mouth, leave water at the sycamore. Never untie a backward knot without listening first. Touch iron when the dogs sing. Keep the house breathing slow. Years, then years again. The ledger fattens and thins trades, hands changes ink. The river keeps the same color where it deepens. Houses tilt are righted tilt again. A hurricane puts its thumb on Natchez and lifts it a fraction just enough for long-held dust to shimmer. The Conjure woman is spoken in 3 tenses at once, as if she is still walking, as if she is already under the roots, as if she has become a way of doing things inside other names. The pack ages, mercy limps. Grief sleeps more yet on certain nights. Both dogs rise and face the crossroad, as though the ground were humming their true names. Children grow tall and leave or stay and learn the second face of the city. They inherit a stare that does not blink when paper shouts. A riverboat singer adds a verse no one remembers teaching him about a jar that would not confess, and a road that bit its own tail, and the crowd drunk and almost happy goes quiet for the length of one heartbeat. Then sings along. A courthouse renovation finds a box, mislaid full of minor things, a button blackened to coin dark, a note about uncooperative canines. A priest's salt invoice, a shell receipt with the water boy's name spelled wrong. No one calls the papers. The box is moved to a shelf that sags and stays there until a clerk, bored young soft to ghost stories, copies a line into his notebook because he likes the music of it, a memory that refused to stay still. He cannot say why he thinks of a mother when he reads it aloud. The crossroad remains patient as roots. It keeps its own archive in cool loam. People come the kind who hear better after midnight and do small, ordinary reverences, a ribbon tied backwards and left. A pepper pinch under a stone. A jar of water with just enough mud to make the liquid remember standing. No speeches. No brimstone. Only the domestic labor of keeping a hinge from squealing. Sometimes a hound not owned by anyone, now thin and pleased by the world, lies there as if the earth were warm. Sometimes frost gathers there in August, a thread of white like the first sentence of winter. And a passerby who does not believe in anything at all pauses and decides to be kind for the rest of the day without understanding why. And on certain fog-heavy nights, when the river draws itself up like a witness, footsteps appear at the landing. Step in and do not step out. Lanterns sway under galleries that have seen too much. A whippoorwill misses its beat carefully. Somewhere a kitchen clock swallows a minute whole and pretends not to. In rooms where babies breathe and old people remember, the air smells briefly of pepper and pennies. And a silence settles, not fearful, attentive. If you stand in such a room and ask out loud, what remains, the answer comes in the smallest grammar the earth can manage. Not triumph, not justice, not even safety, but a correction. The kind that teaches a dog to hesitate, a path to loop, a town to admit it has 2 faces. The kind that asks a single final question and leaves it on your tongue the way a river leaves salt on a glass. When the dogs turned back, what exactly did they recognize?